We're back to Ask Rabbi Wednesday. This morning at work, one of the clients in the spirituality group that I facilitate, he asked the following question. It was a Jewish man, and he asked, "Can a person see God?" And he said, the way he described it, he said, during Woodstock, people, they took LSD and they claimed they saw God, but he doesn't believe it. So, alright, I never tried it, so I don't know, and I don't plan to because it's illegal. And but I live in the neighborhood. Woodstock took place a few miles down from my home. Not that I'm particularly proud of that. Some folks are. I remember I worked in another institution, and one of the clients, he said that he actually went. He lived in Binghamton at the time, and he drove down, and he was so utterly disgusted that he just turned around. But he said the 17B was backed up, and they had a hard time going back to Binghamton. It's about an hour and a half drive. I think he said it took about 5 hours. That was in '69. Now we so let's address this question. There's two angles we can address it from. I think the story is from the Balatanya, that his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, they were Chassidish Rebbes, and at the time, of course, the Tzemach Tzedek was a young child, and he asked his grandfather, he said, "Zayde, do you think you'll see God?" And he said, "I'm getting to the point where I don't see anything but God." Of course, that doesn't mean that we accept a pagan form of pantheism to say that everything is God, but rather that God is in everything and He's behind everything. Maybe even everything's made of God, but God is much greater. I once heard it. Rabbi Wade should be well. A very famous Ger Tzedek. He lives in Yerushalayim. He's a Ger Chassid, so he's a Ger. He used to be a Methodist minister before he came Tachas Country Shechina. He became a Jew. And Rabbi Wade, he said, and he's also a professor, Rabbi Dr. Wade. So he said, the big mistake of Benedict Spinoza, who was excommunicated, was that you could imagine that there's a sponge in the middle of the ocean, and the sponge is surrounded by water and is filled with water. And Spinoza and the pagan pantheists would say all there is the sponge, and the sponge is filled with water. Even the sponge is water. Water is absorbed into every aspect of the sponge, but there's only the sponge and there's nothing else. And they don't recognize there's a whole ocean outside the sponge, and that doesn't even come close. It's only a small mashal, a small parable to try to understand. Of course, we're speaking about infinity, which would make the ocean look like nothing, or all the oceans and the whole universe is nothing. And so that's what our sages say, that God is the place of the world. The sages often refer to God as Hamakom, the place, but the world is not His place. And the Kabbalists describe God as Memale Kol Almin, the Sovev Kol Almin, that He fills all worlds and He surrounds all worlds. Now, that's A. So, in essence, God is everywhere, and what we mean about seeing God is seeing God's power, God's hand, God's providence in the world, and recognizing that. Now, that's not what he's talking about there. He's talking about this gentleman who asked the question, talking about people using psychedelic drugs to alter their consciousness, and that they believe they've seen God. Yes, son. Yes. So anyway, we can understand as follows, and a lot of what I'm saying is based on what I understand, although I might be probably misunderstanding, from a Makubal, a Kabbalist, who I met once. He lives in Tennessee at the moment, past few years. Rabbi Ariel Bar Tzadok. He has a website, koshertorah.com. It's been on TV often on the History Channel. Brilliant, very special man. Don't agree 100% with everything he says, but you don't have to. I don't think that either. Now, Rabbi Bar Tzadok explains it like this. Carl Jung, great psychologist, he said that he interviewed people all over the world studying psychology, people with various prognoses of mental illness, and even other people in various not diagnosed with any mental illness, and they experience a reality all the same. People from different cultures, different backgrounds, different countries, different languages, different religions, and they all experience similar things, which most scientists would assume is just chemicals in the brain. That it's a fantasy. The question is, how is it that they experience all the same thing? Now, one possibility could be evolutionary, that since we come from common ancestry, we share in common these memories and experiences and so forth. The problem with that is that, although I'm not an evolutionist, but let's talk in the realm of what's accepted in the mainstream science. There are two different major views of evolution, both of which have been widely discredited, but one of which would be closer to what's accepted, and it's actually, to a certain, on a small scale, is true. Everyone admits. You have the Lamarckian model of evolution and the Darwinian model of evolution. Lamarck would say that the giraffe is reaching up to reach the trees, and that causes the child to grow a longer neck, and the next child, and the next child. It would almost be akin to saying that if you would cut off a leg of an animal, that its child would be born with 3 legs. And we know that's not true. That's obviously nonsense. As opposed to the Darwinian idea, which would be genetics, and of course they would say there's certain mutations, perhaps random mutations. I would argue to say that there's rather latent, information from the beginning, designed that way by a benevolent creator. But that these variations in their survival of the fittest, and everyone agrees that on the microevolutionary scale that's what happens. That's basically scientific fact. To extend it to macroevolution, there's no evidence of the missing links are all still missing. Now, that's neither here nor there. That's not the purpose of what we're saying. But the thing is that I don't understand how, although I could be wrong, these type of shared memories and experiences and things could be passed on genetically. So therefore, that would be that approach to this observation of Jung would be purely Lamarckian, and would be Lamarckian evolution is considered quackery. Now, what's the other option, which the scientists don't want to admit to, of course, is that there's a spiritual world, and that all of these people are sharing experiences because they have extrasensory perception into something that's not measured by our normal five senses, and that there is a spiritual world, or even many spiritual worlds, that exist outside of the realm which mainstream science currently accepts, although with quantum physics and other things is coming closer and closer to accepting. So that being said, people come in contact with beings. If you want to use a scientific sounding word, although it might be more science fiction sounding, beings from other dimensions, extra dimensional, which is a form of extraterrestrial, as Rabbi Tzadok would point out. It's just that the extraterrestrial doesn't mean from another physical planet, but rather from another spiritual plane, another dimension. I've heard some Native Americans refer to that as another another vibration, which goes along with the quantum physics idea, actually. Now, in classical Western spirituality, we have discussion of beings that in English we call angels and demons. And that's what there is. In the Near East, mostly in Islam, but not exclusively so, you have discussion of jinn, which in English has been made into the cognate of genies. And they're not necessarily like the wish-granting beings like in the movies like Aladdin. They're actually most similar, if you study what the Jewish tradition, the Kabbalistic tradition says about demons and demonology, they're very similar. The jinn. Which are not necessarily evil, the way many Western demonologies would teach, that the demons are the minions of Satan. That's not how it's understood in the Kabbalistic traditions, but rather that they're basically just beings who live on another plane, extraterrestrials, extra-dimensionals, who have their own societies, their own lives, and that's who they are. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean they're all benevolent. Just like in human society, you run into saints and you run into sinners, you run into policemen, you run into gangsters. And that's the world of the Shadim. They don't really care much about us, most of them, because they live on another plane. They have no interest in our world, unless they have something to gain. They probably see us like we see cattle, something to use for food. This is how Rabbi Tzadok explains. And I don't want to get too involved in this, but obviously most people wouldn't know. Rabbi Bartzadok explains, if they would encounter an extra-dimensional being, the average person would not know the difference between an angel and a demon. And if a demon wanted to present itself as an angel, or even have the audacity to claim itself to be God, what's to stop it? There are certain parameters he described. For example, the Talmud tells us that Rabbi Judah the Prince, Judah Nasi, Rabbeinu Kodesh, would come and recite Kiddush for his family every Friday night after he left this world. The question is, how do we know? There's a Sefer Minchas Cohen from the Shevet Musar, who's a Rav in Izmir, Turkey. And the Shevet Musar brings this question. He asks, how do we know that this Rabbeinu Kodesh was him? And the answer is that there's a tradition that kochos etumah, forces of impurity, cannot come in the form of the tzaddikim, cannot come in a holy and righteous and pure form. There's another question with that. Basically, it's like this: if you know what a particular righteous person looked like, a particular tzaddik looked like, have an authentic photograph or authentic picture, you can know for sure that that's not, and it's really them, it's not slightly off, but it's in the exact form. You can know that that's who's visiting you, that's who you're in contact with their spirit. For whatever reason you want to be in contact. But if you don't know what they look like, and someone is coming and claiming to be someone that you wouldn't know what they look like, we don't have a picture of, let's say, the Rebbe Melech, Rabbi Elimelech Leshensky, even the Baal Shem Tov, the picture that's claimed to be Baal Shem Tov is not the Baal Shem Tov. We don't have pictures of a lot of the tzaddikim. So you can be sure, there's no way to be sure it's them. And it's almost for sure that it's not them. Because, well, why are they coming to you? And we demonstrate this with the following story. That the Shevet Musar brings that happened by him in Turkey, in Izmir. And Rabbi Bartzadok tells a story. And I share this often in class. That there was a fellow, he came to the Shevet Musar, and he said, Rebbe Chacham, I am experiencing visions. There's 3 fellows, they come to me, 3 beings. They look pretty holy, and they say they're Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They're Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There's another one, also looks pretty holy. He says he's Gabriel, the angel Gabriel. That's one who's appeared in many visions, as many other angels as well. So he said, I know I'm not worthy to have such a vision. But they're only telling me good things. Is this real or not? Now, today, if someone will come to a rabbi or whoever clergy, with such a story, they would probably send them to a psychiatrist. Or just ignore them, or just brush them off. The Shevet Musar was smart. He understood the truth of what goes on behind the scenes. And so he said, next time Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob come to you, ask them the following question. Are you the Avos HaOlam? Are you the patriarchs from the Bible? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Are you just three guys who got together, who happen to have the names Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you're trying to fool me? And wouldn't you know, once he asked that question, they never came back again. The story goes that Gabriel, this one calling himself Gabriel, who obviously was not the Archangel Gabriel, he was kind of upset. He said, why did you reveal yourself? This was supposed to be our secret. Why did you tell the rabbi? The rabbi gave him a kameya, and eventually he left him alone as well, this Gabriel character. And so we learn from there that many people have visions. Some people even start religions around them. It doesn't mean they're mentally ill. It doesn't mean that what they're seeing does not exist. But what they are seeing quite often could be something demonic posing as something holy. And trying to fool you. And if you don't know, what Gabriel looks like. You don't know what Elijah the prophet looks like. You don't know what any of these look like. So all these books, channeled literature and so forth, it doesn't mean that it's real. And of course no man has seen God, the scripture tells us. So of course that's ridiculous if people claim they saw God. So that's the answer. Of course, people who take drugs are targets for these beings. So that's one of the many reasons, in addition to the fact that it's illegal and dangerous and unhealthy, but it's also unhealthy spiritually to take drugs like this, because these beings will seek out people who abuse drugs as easy targets, as food sources. And so of course, not because the chemicals and the drugs are making up a fake story in the brain. No, the drugs are actually expanding their consciousness, making these people aware of a greater spiritual world that exists beyond what exists in our world. However, what they're seeing, since they have no discernment, since they don't know, since their brain is altered and they've lost their sensibility.
No.
So these visions are false. Not that they're not real. They're real beings, but they're posers. There'll be someone claiming to be something else. It's the same thing people with Ouija boards and things. I remember when I was a kid, I didn't know any better, and I remember we were playing with, it was before I was religious, and we were playing with a Ouija board. We encountered someone claiming to be Abraham Lincoln. And we asked, who killed you? And he said he killed himself. Now we know John Wilkes Booth killed Lincoln. And I never heard any conspiracy theory claiming that it was some kind of a suicide by assassin thing, and it doesn't really make much sense anyway. But of course some creature, some being that we encountered was pretending to be Lincoln just to fool us. It's not fake, it's real, but it's not really Lincoln, meaning it's fake. It's a fake Lincoln, but it's not a fake spirit. And that's why we got to stay away from these things, because they're pointless. Not only they're pointless, but they're dangerous, because people can be misled into falsehoods and lies because of these things. And so obviously people claiming to see God as an actual vision of the actual essence of God is impossible. Now, did God appear to the prophets in different forms? Yes, that's something else. But we don't have that today. All we have, but we do have plenty of people who are encountering demonic beings, who are trying to take advantage of people. And so that's why we have to learn discernment. You know, the story goes, King Solomon was displaced by the demon Ashmedai, Asmodeus, and he was displaced from his throne, and they figured it out because he was acting strange and he wouldn't take off his shoes. And the story goes is that they say an angel has a straight foot like a ox, like a hoof. It's interesting because the secular Western demonology would say that the demons have goats.